Hi everyone, my name is Levi Karvonen. I'm an International Communications Officer at RFSL. And first of all, I want to thank ForumSIP for inviting me and all the great panelists here today. ForumSIP believes that everybody should be free to express and name themselves as they wish, and to be proud of who they are and to be able to fully enjoy their rights and live a life free of violence. And I think that's a really great message right now that we have exited Pride Month. But of course, we have several panelists here with us today who's going to talk about these themes, and I'm going to start introducing them to you. I can also say, I forgot to mention that, but I use he, him pronouns, so you can refer to me in that way if you want. But I think we should start with Juan Felipe. Juan Felipe Rivera Osorio, as your full name is. Juan Felipe is a lawyer specializing in public management and administrative institutions. And he also has a master's degree in public law for administrative management. And currently he's in Colombia Diversa. He's the litigation coordinator. And as a part of Colombia Diversa, he was part of this famous case of Sergio Urrego, who you might know. It was a big case in Colombia where a gay student committed suicide after being discriminated against and in school. And Colombia Diversa picked up the fight for him and his family. So Juan Felipe, maybe you can give us a little wave so the audience can see you. Great. I'm going to continue with Marcela Romero, who is a trans feminist activist and defender of the human rights of trans people. In 2009, she received an Outstanding Woman of the Year award from the National Congress, and she was also the author of Argentina's gender identity law. Marcela is also the regional coordinator of the Latin America and Caribbean Network of Trans People and the president of the Association of Transvestites, Transsexuals, and Transgender People of Argentina. Wow, that's many great titles. And Marcela is also, of course, currently director of RedLacTrans, which she founded, and they are working with the creation and sustainability of trans housing in Buenos Aires and region. We're also joined by someone I know previously, who is Yaya Aye Myat, who is a Christian transgender woman of the Karen ethnicity of Myanmar. You can give us a little wave, perhaps, Yaya? Thank you. She's a well-known facilitator for LGBT advocacy, behavior change communication, civic education, and network training workshops. She's also the founder of the National Transgender People Alliance of Myanmar, and she has advocated for the rights of transgender people up until the coup of 2021, which you probably have heard of. And following the coup, Jaya fled the country and resettled in Sweden, same country where I am, where she continues to advocate for the rights of LGBT people in Myanmar. She's also a board member of Women Lead. And last but not least is Festus. And Festus works with Q Initiative, LGBTQ plus led organization in Kenya. He's a social worker specializing in human rights, sexual reproductive health and rights, HIV programming, violence prevention, and many other things. He is also a board member of Global Men Engaged Alliance and also has a seat in Learning for Change Working Group. And this is a learning space for SRHR actors around the world. I mean, wow, this list of all your accomplishments is so amazing to have all of you here. I'm really glad. So the first question I got for the panel then is, what does Pride mean to you? Either to you as an organization, to your organization, or to you as an activist? And this, of course, as I said, it could be, you can interpret this in the way you want. There could be many answers to this question, but maybe we can start with you, Festus. Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I hope I'm audible. So thank you so much for the introduction and for the question. So what does pride mean to me? I think pride for me, so I hadn't really thought about it as much and until we went through pride celebrations, and then I had to have, and people asked me personally, as an activist, what does it mean? And for myself, I hadn't really thought of it as much, because I was like, yo, I celebrate being queer every day, after going through the notions, after going through coming out to yourself, identifying as a queer person and going through the challenges that come with it, and eventually get to the point of acceptance. So I thought for me, pride was just accepting yourself as for who you are and living authentically. But there was a conversation that I had with someone who talked about pride being that, occupying public spaces with your public, being public about your identity and occupying public spaces with your new identity. And for me, that was and I think that's what pride means right now. Okay, those are not my original words, but it's pride means knowing who you are, accepting who you are, and occupying public spaces with that, your new identity. Because I know that because of, criminalization and so many other things, people are not able to publicly occupy spaces as queer people. So for me, I believe that pride is being able to do that. And of course, for our organization, it means being safe while doing it, because we know that a lot of these conversations about pride are usually borrowed from the West, I would say. So when people talk about pride, they immediately you think of pride parades, and you think of, so many other things, which has a potential for negative connotations, especially in states where homosexuality is criminalized. But I think for Q Initiative, for us, pride means just accepting yourself and being able to identify as who you are in a way that, in such a way that you are safe enough to actually continue. You're after coming out and saying, yes, I'm queer, and yes, it's Pride Month, you're still alive till the next Pride Month, it's being cognizant of the context we exist in, and making sure that people are able to safely identify and safely live their lives, and people have actually the freedom to do that. So that's what pride means to me and to the initiative. Thank you.
That's a really good response. Thank you, Festus. You brought up so many interesting things, but I also think about this. I guess that's also why we left this question a bit open, because of course we all engage with pride very differently. Pride parades are maybe not possible where everyone lives. It might have a lot of negative associations as well. I know Pride in Sweden, for example, has been criticized for being very corporate. There are questions about, are really everyone welcome at Pride? Are really the most marginalized people in our communities able to participate? There are, of course, a lot of questions within this as well. And is this, it was a really interesting answer. Is there anyone else of the panelists do you have similar thought of as Festus, or do you have other ideas? Feel free to grab the word, otherwise I'll dish it out. Juan Felipe, go ahead.
All right. Thank you once again for the invitation, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. So pride for me means two things, and I think they're related to one another. But the first one is, I think it's an act of self-love. It's a revolutionary act of self-love. And it is revolutionary because most of us grow up in societies that have done an extensive effort to wipe us from the memory, from history, and from most institutions. We come from societies where the churches tell us being LGBTQ+ is wrong. We come from states which sometimes criminalize our existence, or sometimes punish it or disregard it. We come from societies in which our families sometimes reject us. So being proud of who we are in the face of such adversity, I think it's an act of revolution and self-love. But I think also pride is important because for me, it's also an act of remembrance. It's an act of knowing both the path I took to get here, because as most queer folk, we have to endure a really hard and long path to recognize ourselves as queer and live with the consequences of recognizing ourselves in such manner. But it's also an act of memory, of remembering the sacrifice of our transgender brothers and sisters and non-binary individuals, the sacrifices of gay men, lesbian women, of bisexual individuals, and all the whole other identities who have not been properly recognized and publicly acknowledged. So it is remembering who we are, how we got to be here, and it is also an act of saying, I will be here no matter if you accept me or not. My pride does not depend on whether someone else approves of who I am. The pride that I have is something I have built for myself, and I need no one else to acknowledge. So I think that's why it is so revolutionary and so important to embrace this pride. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for a great response. I also really, when I was thinking of this question, I was also kind of on the same path as you, that, to me, pride is, it's about, accepting yourself and loving yourself, not despite your queer identity, not despite being transgender or gay, but because of it, and celebrating that, and really saying that, that we have value as queer people, not for how close we can assimilate ourselves into the normal society. So I think that's really, you really hit the nail there. Yaya, do you have any thoughts on pride and how you engage with this concept?
Thank you very much for the question. And again, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, thank you very much. And for us in Asia, and especially Myanmar, because of our political situation, then we have been in touch or exposed to this concept not very long ago, and then pride is very new to us. And personally, it is not to a shame of ourselves. We are not alone, and we deserve every respect like other human being as well. And then I think this is a sense of pride that we're celebrating. But then we have been only kind of like back to the democratic transition in the last 10 years. But again, right now, because of the military coup in our country, again, we are losing our rights. But then because of the effort that has been made 10 years ago, I think that the momentum is still going on amongst ourselves. But then we have to continue our fights, because our country is one of the countries that still hold capital punishments for same-sex conduct, and especially in the assumption that the LGBT people may be involved in the same-sex conduct. And then this is something very important to us. And then pride means, like everyone else have said, kind of like for us, it's like no matter whatever reason, then we will still be here, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, you really brought up some things to which are very important as well. The criminalization. As far as I know, both Kenya and Myanmar have criminalized same-sex consensual acts between people. And this, of course, also puts you in a very, everyone who lives in these countries puts you in a very different context in relation to pride as well, and how to engage with that. It's very interesting. Marcela, do you have any thoughts about pride and the concept?
Sí, bueno, para mí
Okay, so for me, pride is about reaffirming our fight, the fight that we have here in Latin America, in order to achieve living in a region in which human rights are truly respected. I believe that pride is mainly about being able to decide how you want to live. And I think that this is what we are demanding around the world. We are facing our governments and demanding these rights because human rights are not respected. And so it is necessary that pride marches take place, but these have to be political marches right now. These have to be political acts in which we make people aware of and making us visible as a population. But it's about being visible in such a way that there is clear political participation from the LGBT community. because otherwise it seems as if it's only about Pride Day, as if we only exist on that day. And I think that we have to participate in all spaces, for everything from education to work to other daily spaces, and really support all of these fights. It's not only our fight. It's not only that Pride Day is ours. This is really something that all citizens need to be concerned with at all times.
That was a great response. So moving on then to the next question, and that is about the importance of naming ourselves and acknowledging our existence. And I wanted to add some context to this question. I know in my Swedish context, we often get the question of, why do you need pride? Why do you need to be so loud? Why do you need to have these parades? Why do you talk about LGBT issues? Why don't you talk about everyone? And I wanted to ask you in the panel about this thing. Why is it important to name us as LGBTQI people? And maybe Yaya, do you want to start?
Well, to my understanding, it is important to name us. It is important for us to be loud because we have been silent for a long time. And then, for example, we're talking about right now, I'm not talking about LGBT yet, but then we're talking about equal rights between men and women. Yeah, so that it means that women's rights have been kind of a push away for so many years, and then it is the reason why we're talking about women's rights now. And at the same time, we are talking about gender equality. There's still people out there, there's still countries out there who understand gender is only men and women, but then gender is not only about men and women. It is all about us. It is all people with diverse sexual background or anything. So gender is all a spectrum. So it is important that we need to speak up so that we have equal opportunity and rights. It is not that we want more rights than the other. It is that we do not have the right. So we are asking, we are saying and making our voices heard to have the same rights as others. So this is what we need to name ourselves, what we need to be loud, and then we need to be visible among others, especially like in these Pride festivals, so that people still know that we are here, and we still have the rights like other people. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, very good response. I especially find this thing about, as you're saying, that there are different countries where gender is understood as only men and women. And then it's, of course, extra important to point out that we've been here and people who have been breaking these gender norms have been here for a very long time as well. And I also think it's relating to the colonial history as well of sexuality and gender, and how different variations in gender identities and gender expressions have been invisibilized by colonial powers and continue to be invisibilized as well. Yeah, it really points to the fact why it is so important to name us and talk about these things. Not because we want more rights, but because we want to have the rights that everyone else already does. Is there anyone else another panelist who has any comments or similar thoughts as to Yaya? Marcela, what are your thoughts about this?
Yes, I agree with what Yaya said. It's about decolonizing. I believe that it is necessary to speak about new generations, about new dissidencies, and talk about new constructions when it comes to this whole spectrum. We have different identities, a whole world of possibilities. So it's about deconstructing so that we can face our governments and demand new legislation and new laws. I always say that when we speak, we always have to talk about children and about childhood, because that's where freedom begins and that's where human rights begin. If you, in your childhood, do not have rights or have any freedom, it's very difficult to have a construction or a worldview of true freedom. So we have to demand that states really give children the freedom to be diverse, because otherwise the constructions we have and the laws that we have in our countries are laws that would make it appear that we're born at 18 years of age, but we're not born at 18 years of age. It's almost as if we were born at 18 and then we die at the age of 30. There are no elderly women or people. So that's why we have to deconstruct. We have to deconstruct our legislation. We have to make children, diverse children, visible. And we also have to make older women visible, because this is the reparation that democracies have to really move forward with in our region. It's about children and older people. It's about those of us who survive all of the repression and lack of legislation. And we're still here, standing up and proud, giving it our all, so that we can really affect global change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a great response. I really recognize what you're saying about children as well. And I think that also ties in with the question about why it's important to name us. I can see that Juan Felipe is nodding. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, so when you ask the question, you brought a very important point, and it's like this talking point which people sometimes bring to us, which is, why don't you speak about everybody? And I have like a curious example of what happens when we speak about everybody. Marcela and I, we met in Chile last week. We were at CEPAL conference, ECLAC conference, and it was like a conference about population and development. And everyone talked about leaving no one behind. And they kept repeating this speech all the time from the UN people, from civil society, like it was the whole topic of the conversation. And when the ECLAC or CEPAL published the results of their investigations, they talked about everybody except LGBTQI plus individuals. And that really shocked me. And I was like, what's going on? And when I approached them and I told them like, hey, you're talking about leaving no one behind, but you haven't mentioned LGBTQ people in a single one of your research besides using like the term here and there. They were like, yeah, but it's a really hard thing to research about and we don't have the data and stuff. So it's really funny because when people talk about the category everybody, they have been talking about everybody for thousands of years, but that everybody has excluded women, people of color, people with disability, and of course, LGBTQ plus individuals. So there's like this very important concept that feminists in Latin America repeat, and it is that what is not named does not exist. So it is important for us to always like keep bringing like our issues, our perspective, because otherwise no one else will do it, as it has happened from the government for 1,000 or more years, where we have been completely invisibilized. So I think it is really interesting to keep being loud, keeping pushing forward, bringing up the conversation on the topic, because sometimes the concept of everybody leaves plenty of people behind. That will be like my answer.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good answer. And I brought that up as an example because this is something which my organization, RFSL, Swedish Federation for LGBTQI People, we have gotten this question a lot, especially in relation to our work in Ukraine, where we have been working with local LGBT organizations to support LGBTQI people in Ukraine who are affected by the war. And so many people were very upset with us that we didn't help everyone, that we chose to focus specifically on supporting LGBTQI individuals. And that response to why we did that is exactly the same that you gave now, because we have seen that other organizations, big humanitarian aid organizations, they miss LGBTI people because they don't have that lens, they don't have that perspective. So help that is supposed to reach everyone doesn't reach our communities. And our communities also have special needs that needs to be taken into account, whether that's HIV medicine, hormones for trans people, other types of gender affirming healthcare. If we don't speak about these needs, they are forgotten because it's also recognizing that not everybody has the same needs as well, right? That this group that we're a part of also has needs that we need to have, fulfilled. So that's really good response. Thank you. And thank you for telling us about this conference. It was a very shocking thing to hear about. Festus, do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I do actually. So these are great points. So I'll try not to speak on what has already been spoken about because we already talked about visibility. But I think it's important to name us, to affirm ourselves, because it takes a lot for us to actually get to the point of where we are. Like everyone, like Juan Felipe said, everyone tries to invisibilize us or silence us or criminalize us. So just to get to see people who look like you and have named their identity, I think it's very important. It affirms not only yourself, because it doesn't, just because you come out doesn't mean that that's it, you're comfortable for the rest of your life. You still need affirmation. You still need us to believe in yourself. We also need to, I think affirmation also brings about community, because especially I remember that feeling of, feeling like you're the only one, and because you can't see someone who looks like you or acknowledges their feelings like you, or have the same outlook as you. So I think just naming ourselves and being loud about it is very important for building community, because and I think in my experience as a person and also as an activist, it's communities that nurture and support people, because once in the face of all this negativity and being silenced and criminalization, it's a queer community that supports you and and helps you navigate through life when everyone else doesn't seem to understand you. So that's why it's important to be loud. Thank you.
Thank you. I really resonate with the thing about community. I think it's quite easy. As I said, mentioned previously, I'm from Sweden, and when I talk to people from other countries, people sometimes act like, but there are no problems in Sweden, or all LGBT rights are fulfilled in Sweden. Why do you have these organizations? What are you complaining about? And I can really understand, of course, that we live in so many different contexts, where some contexts where people are so incredibly marginalized and incredibly subjected to violence. So it can, of course, seem ridiculous that we would be complaining when we have all these formal rights. But I mean, something we also have to think about is that the fight is far from over. Even if you have the formal rights, you still need to be able to access them. And for example, we have anti-discrimination laws in Sweden and hate crime laws, but that doesn't mean that people aren't subjected to hate crime. I actually had an acquaintance of mine, a visible non-binary person who's very loud and proud, and they were just standing at the bus stop here in Sweden and was beaten up by someone who just saw them and beat them up because they were queer. And and why I brought this up is also because when that happened, this person, of course, was really, it was a really horrible situation. But then the community was there and gave support, and we fundraised for this person and made sure that they could pay the cost for healthcare and other things that arose in relation to this. And I also think that's very powerful, that we as a community can be there and try when these things happen, when this violence happens, no matter where it is in the world, we can stand up with each other and take care of each other when others aren't taking care of us as they should. So it's really powerful to be part of the community, isn't it? But I also wanted to ask you about what you're working with right now. Are there any struggles or challenges you're facing right now? We live in very different contexts, but I think it's always something to keep fighting for. Maybe Marcela, do you want to start?
I was just listening to what was said about Sweden, where other people in other parts of the world tend to think that nothing happens in more developed countries. And I think that part of capitalism, corporate capitalism, well, they make the world believe that nothing's happening. Nothing happens in certain countries. There's no violence. There's no crime. And so there's an image of our community that's projected that's totally unreal. Look at New York, US. That's one thing, but what happens outside of New York? It's one thing to live in New York, and it's another thing to live in another part of the US and see how the Black community, how the women's community, how the trans community is persecuted. And that's the same thing that we see happening in other countries. White Europeans are one thing, but then we have also colored migration. So these realities are not reflected. And this reality that we experience at the community level is not reflected. I know what it is to be a migrant. I've experienced this. I have shared spaces with Afro colleagues, and I have seen firsthand the state violence that they experience. On the one hand, because they're part of the community, and secondly, because of the color of their skin. And there's another image that is conveyed, because when we get to Pride Day, there's a totally different image that is displayed. What I believe is that, our true reality is not shown. The reality that is experienced by communities in Europe and other more developed countries. We believe there's no discrimination there. The perception is that we are all blonde and blue-eyed and middle class. And so I think that sometimes capitalism, the LGBTI capitalism or corporate facet fails to show these realities. We have these multinational companies that don't let us show our reality. And many of us will not be involved in those corporate multinational spaces. They won't give us jobs. We won't be included to resolve these issues. I think it's a different reality that exists around the world. That is the situation. That's what we have to deal with. And as I said at the beginning, it's about decolonizing and truly showing our reality as the LGBTQ community. And we need to share this experience from all different angles. It's not just about an upper middle class community. We also have a poor and excluded community. And so we need to really make these more excluded colleagues visible, because they won't be included in these marches. There's another reality that's shown many times when it comes to these celebrations and marches.
Thank you. I think you really brought up something interesting. And I think it's also something talking about decolonization and talking about rights and our perception of the Western countries as well. I know that there has been very much an idea of of rights as a linear progress. That some Western countries they're just more advanced. They have just gone further ahead, and it's this kind of ladder that everyone will go through. That it's a certain amount of steps and a certain amount of order. But this myth is, of course, not true. And I think if we compare, for example, Sweden and Argentina, in Sweden, we have tried to get a new gender recognition law for a long time, but we have faced so much backlash from the feminist movement, especially. So we still don't have this new gender recognition law, which would make the lives of trans people so much easier. But if you look instead of Argentina, you have this, you have had, of course, the still many problems in both Argentina and Sweden, but you have this law already, and you have had it for much longer than us. And I think this really comes to show that the idea of, the progressive West and the non-progressive West really isn't true. It's just one example of that. But maybe Festus, do you want to share and some struggles from Kenya? What are you working with at the Q initiative?
Well, of course, I feel like I want to say the usual challenges, which is opposition from the right wing, from faith-based organizations, and just denial of the existence of LGBT people, because it's really unfortunate that even in 2022, people can make statements like, "Oh, but I've never seen an LGBT person before." So it's really, so that's really one of the major challenges that we face. That so the initiative mostly works with young people, so people see it as a phase or it's a youth thing. So and I think it's Marcela who said earlier that it's like people are 18. It's like we are born when you're 18 years old, then we are visible for some time, then after 30 we disappear. So there's that. There's a penal code. So we are seeking to decriminalize sections of the penal code that criminalizes same-sex acts, consensual same-sex acts. We tried that in court, but we're in the appeal stages. So of course there's that. There's violence, and more recently, conversion therapy, cases of conversion therapy. And initially it was something that we hadn't really thought about, because, it wasn't, I feel like it was happening, it was a practice that used to happen, but we didn't have the language for it. Then eventually people are like, wait, that's conversion therapy. Why are you praying for me to change or, convert? So there's that. And, activists are constantly, tirelessly doing the work to just make sure that we are challenging this in various ways. Of course, there's the activists who are working on the legal aspects. There are those who are working on the social, cultural, transforming people's attitudes. There's, of course, those who are doing movement building work. So we are just hoping that, at the end of the day, we are equipping LGBT people with skills so that they can be able to actually do this advocacy and fight for change even in their own homes. The other thing that I would say is a challenge that we are facing is we used to say civic spaces are shrinking, but someone told me that they're not shrinking, they're being shrunk. Like civil society organizations do not have a space anymore, and it's because of so many factors, right? And initially I used to think it was just an Africa thing, but I realized the rise of right-wing ideologists is global, right? It's not a challenge that's only specific to Kenya only. And you find trolling on the internet is quite a thing. You find people just using hashtags to crucify LGBT people and such things. And regardless of how much we organize, because there's a way to organizing, we're just not equipped to deal with this. With the haters, let me just say haters, right? We're just not equipped to deal with them. Like us, we are working on keeping people safe, but their tactics and their ideologies, like for them, it's just. So I think that's a challenge for me, that any small gain you make, it still goes back. And of course, mental health, struggling mental health, not really mental health, but physical and mental health of LGBT persons, and especially past the pandemic, post-COVID moving forward, that is something that has been a challenge for us. Like COVID really destabilized a lot of people, and queer youth were really affected. So that is a challenge. And access to mental health services remains a privilege for many young queer people. Violence, and I'll talk about intimate partner violence from community members. I think those are some of the challenges that you're facing, that, you're trying to make spaces safe and inclusive and affirmative, but we still have this. So I think those are some of the challenges that I would say we are facing. But of course, we're working towards them. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Festus. Juan, Felipe, is there anything you recognize in the things Festus is saying? Any similar challenges or struggles you're working with?
Yeah, so I think that there's many things that have been brought up, and I want to address as well. So as part of Colombia Diversa, we do different kinds of work. We do strategic litigation, we do research, and we do advocacy for LGBTQ rights in Colombia. And when I was listening to you talking about Sweden and people being like, "Oh, you already got everything. What are you whining about?" It really connected with me, because if you see Colombia is a country that has really advanced a lot in LGBTQ rights. We have achieved beautiful judicial rulings, which has enshrined several of our rights: marriage, adoption, transgender document change, access to health, a lot of beautiful things. But when we see the daily life of LGBTQ plus individuals, we find that such achievements or benchmark decisions have not translated in a better quality of life for most LGBTQ folks. So, and this is really interesting, because Colombia, despite its constant linear advance, we still face really harsh challenges. One of the things we have found, for instance, is the homicides. And to give you an example, by 2019 in Colombia Diversa, we had 109 registered homicides against LGBTQI plus individuals. By 2020 and 2021, that number has doubled. We're around 226 for 2020, 218 for 2029. So this shows you that even if you improve in rights, there's a big gap between the rights you achieve and the quality of life of people. And that is something that is quite a challenge for us, because it also means that we have to do more work beyond fighting judicial stands or at Congress or at government in order to improve the quality of life of people. And another thing I wanted to touch on, and these challenges we have, is, which have been brought upon, but I really want to highlight, is first, in Latin America, we're enduring a really hard conservative movement, an anti-LGBT, anti-feminist movement, which is organized, heavily financed, and they are doing advocacy work, as we do, before the UN, before the Organization of American States, before every single forum we go to claim our rights, they're going there to oppose them. So that's a really big challenge for us, and they even set up these important marches and protests, and it's really overwhelming. But another somewhat disheartening challenge is the friendly fire we're getting from some feminist movement, and particularly the trans exclusionary feminists. And it's really sad to see feminist sisters standing with conservative groups against LGBTQI plus individuals. It's insane. And I don't know what they hope to achieve. And it's really sad, again, because not only it undermines our rights, but at the end of the day, they're undermining their own rights. So it's what are you doing there? And this is a conversation we must have, and we must find ways to overcome it, or reach some kind of agreement, because this is something that is starting to bother us locally, but regionally. And I think it's a debate that we're pending to have, and it's a big challenge for us to have this friendly fire from sectors which were in theory our allies. So I think those are some of the challenges we're facing, and some of the things we have to resolve.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very scary development. I think we have really seen this development in Sweden in recent years. But some feminists, not all feminists, of course, but some feminists really have made trans people a primary target, and collaborating together with transphobic agents and actors to remove the rights of trans people. And it's so interesting, because we also know that women's rights and LGBTQI rights are so interlinked. If you look at the US, for example, and abortion rights and the Supreme Court ruling, what is this going to mean? LGBTQI people are definitely the next step. And it's also, it's just, I think it's really painful when it's allies and people you are allied with who's attacking you. as well, because we are already under so many other attacks, and then to have your allies turn on you as well, it's a really painful development. Actually, I'm very sorry to hear that you're also struggling with that in Colombia. It's really a worldwide phenomenon at this point. Yeah, are there any struggles that you recognize from these discussions? Anything you want to bring up?
Well, thank you very much. And then listening to the other panelists, and then I just realized something, that I have been resettled to Sweden, and I think I am safer. Maybe I'm safer, but then my brothers and sisters who are back home or who are in Asia are still fighting for their rights, and then they're still fighting huge battles. And then listening to other people, what reminds me of is that even in our democratic movements, we still have people, human rights defenders, with double standard. They only think that the rights that belongs to them is their rights, and the rights that belongs to other people is not their rights. This is something we have to be very careful about. And then while convincing other people who do not know us, then we have to also try to make efforts to let people who knows us, like to have the same page with us. And the other thing, what I notice here is that we have rules, regulations, laws that protect us. We said protect us. But then in a real sense, it is protecting us and also at the same time punishing other people who are doing the wrong things to us. So people who kind of like, committing crime against us, actually they are afraid of these laws that will punish us, and they don't do it. But in their mindset, are they really caring for us? Are they really thinking that we're the same like them? It is very important to kind of like, understand what is going on really, because they are afraid of the law, and then they don't kind of like commit crimes against us. But then in their mindset, what are they thinking? Sometimes we have to understand also our rights, because our rights is always followed by responsibilities, and then like someone's rights cannot be a burden or acquired at the expenses of someone else's rights, So this is what I would like to say. Thank you very much. And we cannot stop our fight. It will still going on. We will have to continue our fight no matter where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's really true. One person's rights doesn't mean that the other person also, like, everyone needs to access the rights that they need. I think we're going to round up soon, and we're almost at the end of our time. I just wanted to ask you a final question, and maybe you can give me a shorter answer to spare our audiences. But is there something you have been proud of this year or the last year in relation to rights?
I would like to reflect on something that was just said, which was about abortion in the US. I believe that it's very clear what is happening in countries where the banner of human rights is being flown. It's clear that these macho attitudes, in the case of US, it's an issue of control of sexual and reproductive rights and health. And I think it's the patriarchy and the macho attitude in the US, which is really saying no to abortion, because there's a resistance to any kind of control of male sexual and reproductive rights. So men want to continue to control women and decide when they should bear children. So what have we done this year? And what do I feel proud of this year? First off, I feel proud to be able to help affect change in the region, and also to really fly the flag of gender identity law here in Latin America, and to be able to show the world and to show society that trans people, well, we exist, and we also resist the violence that is meted out by the state and by society. We want further changes in the region. We demand laws for us to live in equal conditions. And the word democracy means rights and equality. We need to let society know this. We are not asking for anything more than what is written and enshrined in human rights. What we want is to access the same economic, social, political, and economic rights that everybody else has. We want to be able to live in our countries with true democracy. I've always said that trans people, well, we're not different to anyone else. Everyone else makes us different due to the patriarchy and due to this machista attitude in the region. We need to be able to occupy political spaces. We need to be involved in decision making. And in some countries, we are doing this. We need to recognize that there are universal rights, that they have to be respected, and countries that do not respect these rights are therefore violating the rights of everyone. The trans population in Latin America demands that our governments, our democratic governments, fulfill all resolutions and everything that they sign in the UN. Because at the end of the day, they are violating human rights and national constitutions, not us. We are not violating any constitution, nor any democratic right. It's states that are doing this. And I am so happy to hear my colleagues from the region, for example, Juan, Felipe, I know there are many more. I'm so proud to be able to see that we continue in this fight together. We have to continue to focus on constitutional rights. We need to fight for the right to housing, to health, to all basic rights that other citizens have. But thank you once again, and thank you for the space to speak. And thank you to my colleagues here from other regions. Keep up the fight, and I am here at your service for anything you might need, if I can help with anything at all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Marcela. Thank you for joining us. Such a great send-off from Marcela. Maybe we can move to Yaya. Do you have something you're proud of this year?
Well, I mean, like, I am always proud of the movement that we have been carried on, because our ancestor has fought for us, so that homosexuality is no longer a disease in the ICD. And recently, transgenderism is no longer a disease in the ICD. These are the proud moments that our ancestors have done and have put their effort so that we are benefiting from it. We have to keep our work so that the generations and the generations to come will also kind of like, entitled and enjoy the rights as other people. So I'm always proud of the movements that we are doing. Thank you.
Festus, do you want to continue? Is there anything you're proud of or Q Initiative is proud of?
I think, well, I'm proud of a couple of things. I think I'm proud of the resistance that the community, the movement, and has been pushing up against, the oppression and the challenges that we're facing. I'm also proud of the courage we have to actually just do things, and I think to effect the change. And I think, okay, not many people, especially, and I'm lacking the words for it, but for someone who has not had a chance to fight, for people who have not had a chance to fight for their rights, they wouldn't understand why we do what we do. So for, just speaking up, organizing community spaces and doing that. So for someone who, and when you explain this to people, they get so shocked. They're like, wait, you are organizing so that people can see. I don't know, like, it's very crazy, but I'm really glad that despite the noises that, queer people have been hearing, that we have been able to actually show up and do the work and just create safe spaces for future generations. And I know, like, when you talk to activists, they'll say, oh, I'm doing this so that the ones who come after me don't have to go through it. And I think it's very important, So I'm really proud of that we are continuing what other people did. We are continuing with the work that our ancestors or the ones who came before us did. So I'm really proud of that. And personally, this is something that and I'm really proud of, was the renewal of the Rgbi mandate, an independent expert on the Rgbi mandate. I think that was, when you're working at a local level, you don't think that your efforts link with the global, because there's some sort of a disconnect between global advocacy and and local, regional, national. But then just seeing how activists, especially in the global spaces, like who are involved in this the UPR process, the Human Rights Council, such things, like the level of coordination that they do, just to make sure that such a thing, lobbying with member states and so on. I know there's everyone who's doing the work, but I'm incredibly proud of the organization that they do and how they're able to link up with organizations, queer organizations from all around the world in whatever capacity they do. I don't know, like, I feel like that was just, that's something I'm really proud of. And while these things are ongoing, I think we won't know until July 8th, but I'm really proud that even in whichever context that we are in, even regardless of how terrible things are, at least we have some things that are working for us, whether it's judicial precedents, whether it's laws or whatever. Like, there are some changes that have been made, and it just means that we still need to continue to fight to access that. So I'm really proud of that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's very true. The renewal of the mandate. Let's hope it goes through. Okay, Juan, Felipe, can you finish up? You get the final word.
All right.
No pressure.
Thank you so much. I think as Colombia Diversa, we're proud of the impact we have had in the last years. There's things we have done, obviously, with other organizations, but being part of an organization which has worked so hard since 2004 to recognize LGBT rights in Colombia, it's something really important. It's through a strategic litigation, we have achieved things like gay marriage, same-sex adoption, protection against LGBTQI individuals in schools, transgender access to health, to documents according to the gender identity, and all of these many victories, which has also allowed us to even advocate for important historical events, like having the first peace agreement in the world, which includes LGBTQ rights, and part of the conversation, which was the peace agreement between the government of Colombia and the former FARC guerrilla. So those are things that make me proud of the work we do in Colombia Diversa. But I think what I find myself in a personal level more proud of is about our resilience as a movement, as LGBTQI plus movement. We have endured two pandemics, not just the COVID pandemics, but the HIV pandemic. We have survived against all odds, with everything against us, and we're standing here. We're having important conversations. We are evolving. We are changing, and that is something that I think speaks a lot about both our ability to adapt, but also about our path and knowing our history. And I think that knowing that history and knowing that each step we take on this road was paved by other activists before us for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. It's really emboldening. It makes you feel proud. It makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel important to know who you are, where you come from, and where you want to go. So that will be my answer. I think I'm proud of the road we're walking, of the paths we're forging, and about these kind of spaces. As Colombia Diversa, we're currently having two important networks we work with, the three networks. One of them is the LGBT litigant networks of the Americas. So we share and have different discussions. We have a Sin Violencia network, which also shares like this idea of building statistics, which is really important for us to visibilize our violence, and even the LGBTQI coalition. So all of these efforts remind me that even though we have different local contexts, different backgrounds, different challenges, I think we can come together in spaces like this to share our information, to share our skills, and learn from one another. So I think that's also very important to be proud of, and I'm happy to be here, proud to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Okay, so let's wrap this up. First of all, big thank you to Forum Civ for organizing this. And I think also on the behalf of both RFSL and Forum Civ, we want to, of course, thank all the great panelists, Juan, Felipe, Festus, Yaya, Marcela. Thank you so much for being here and contributing with your expertise and your perspectives and your stories. And of course, thank you to everyone in the audience who has listened to this and been here with us for the entire time. I think we will stop there, and let's keep the fight going. See you around, everyone. Have a nice rest of the day, evening, morning, wherever you are. Bye, everyone.